Sometimes grown-ups need to lie. It's hard to explain, but Look, here's a good example. When your mommy was pregnant with you, she gained a good 40 pounds. There was nothing she wouldn't eat, and Daddy was scared. But when she'd ask me, how do I look? I'd say, honey, you look great. You're beautiful. You're glowing. If I'd have told Mommy she looked like a cow, it would have hurt her feelings. Understand?
Like you, be strong to hold the powers of the sun.
All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
Let's listen to Pavarotti.
Can I be your superhero?
Hello, welcome to The Revealing. I'm your host, Pavarotti, and I'm here to discuss the Idaho 4 case. And I wanted to get this one out to you as early this morning as I could because, you know, for a long time we've all known that the case against BRYAN KOHBERGER has mainly been tried in the media from one perspective, that Kohberger is guilty and there's no other way to look at it. Kohberger's guilty. And for a long time, I thought to myself, well, you know, this is just the mainstream media working their magic. They're siding with law enforcement and they're just doing their thing. They don't want to think any other way. But here lately, as I watch some of this coverage, it really is more than that. In this case, it really is more than that. It's not just mainstream media being mainstream morons and blindly following what law enforcement is saying. It is an actual concerted effort to combat any type of information that is released with a rebuttal from mainstream media. And it's very apparent now. Last night, I mean, I have to watch them. So I was watching, you know, Ashley Banfield, and I am not believing what I'd seen because there's really no way that anybody can read the autism spectrum disorder documents about the ailments that BRYAN KOHBERGER has and not gain a little bit of sympathy for BRYAN KOHBERGER. But then when you watch the mainstream morons, she had a coffin differ on there last night talking about the Strava app that she went and found BRYAN KOHBERGER and how Kohberger can run a 6-minute mile and how somebody would have to be in excellent shape like that to be able to pull something like this off.
First guest tonight is the sleuth who unearthed that data. Former FBI agent Jennifer Coffindoffer. You think the right way, because you were onto this 2 years ago, before we knew about this developmental disorder and challenges to his speed and agility. 2 years ago, as a runner, you checked the Strava app to see if he was on it, and you found that he was.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me, Ashley. You know, when you look at somebody who's capable of killing 4 people in such a small amount of time, you're going to want to know, is this person physically fit enough to do this type of murder? And when I saw this on Strava, I got the picture of somebody that not only is very coordinated, but also very fast.
I don't care if you can run a 6-minute mile or not. That doesn't make you a ninja where you can go around like a, you know, like a sous chef and unalive 4 people with a knife inside of 7 minutes in a 2-story house, 3-story house. I mean, but the fact that they would have her on at this point talking about that Strava app, I mean, is there any way to verify the coffin differ, you know, looking up Kohberger on Strava? I mean, does Strava just allow you to look up everybody and see every little detail that they do? I don't know, but it sure was weird timing for them to be bringing up that segment. And it shows me that this is just it is a real concerted effort to brainwash the masses out there before this trial. And it's quite disturbing. And it's not just the mainstream morons. I mean, I've told y'all for a long time that there was people out here that would even pretend to be on the side of truth and justice, but all they were really doing was trying to move the needle. And it's very apparent because they're openly feeling like they have won now because they have moved that needle far enough that even people that claim to have a critical thinking mind is backing up the mainstream morons. So it's a concerted effort, and it has a web that is been spun all over to make sure that this thing goes down a certain way. And nothing could be more important than what we discussed in the video yesterday, because that truly is, I mean, the state's entire case, and they're trying to hide the one piece of proof that would prove BRYAN KOHBERGER is innocent. Yet I see people post things like this. They take what the state says in response to the advanced timing records, and it's the state admitting to lying in their first motion in limine. And they go, oh, well, there has it. Well, 7 days, that's it. Are you kidding me? Do you not understand that what the state did was lie? And then that's an admission of a lie, and you expect us to believe that that's a fact? Come on now. I mean, you have got to be kidding me. So, I mean, we're going to have to call out these lies, and we got to get this information out there to people. So what we're going to talk about is those advanced timing records. I'm going to show you where the state blatantly lied, but the second lie that they told is even more egregious than the first. And if they lied the first time, why the heck would we believe them the second time? Come on now. Once they lie on something, they're just going to continue to lie. It's like it's like a never-ending story for these people. So let's take a look at what I'm talking about. I'll show you the lie in real time, and then you tell me if we should buy their BS that they're trying to serve us up for dinner on the second run. Let's look. Okay, now let's watch this lying happen in real time. And this is not Pavarotti's interpretation of the state line. This is actual lying. And remember, these things happen. Let's keep track of these dates here. All right, this one is February 25th, 2025. Okay, so this is the date of the lie, the first lie. And this is the state's motion in limine about AT&T timing advance records. And it says the Latah County prosecuting attorney respectfully moves the court for, an order in limine prohibiting the defense from making any reference to the absence of AT&T timing advance records for BRYAN KOHBERGER. So this was the state initiating this. Hey, we don't want KOHBERGER and his team to be able to even reference the absence of the AT&T timing advance records for KOHBERGER. We don't want the jury to even know we hid those. And what is their argument? The state has been advised and will offer documentation and or testimony that AT&T records are produced by their Global Legal Demand Center. AT&T Global Legal Demand Center did not begin producing timing advance records until May of 2023. Now, this is not a statement that can be misinterpreted. AT&T did not begin producing. They didn't begin making them, producing time in advance records until May of 2023. This is their argument. They're going to back it up with documentation and testimony. And then they ask that any statements or inferences by the defense counsel or their witnesses that there is additional evidence that could have been provided or was not provided is a mischaracterization of the evidence and should not be allowed. This is a very simple motion in limine. They didn't put a lot of other stuff in there. They said AT&T did not begin producing timing advance records until May of 2023. So that means they're stating, and they're going to provide documentation and testimony, that AT&T did not begin producing them They didn't begin making them. Well, they didn't even make them, is what they said, until May of 2023. And we're going to provide documentation and testimony. They didn't make them. They did not begin producing them. So what does the defense do? Well, they object. And they say, and by the way, this was how many days later? There's the date. 17th of March, 2025. So this is 24 days later. All right, 24 days. And BRYAN KOHBERGER and his attorneys of record object to the state's motion in limine to exclude reference to unproduced AT&T and timing advance records. The state's motion to seek to prevent Mr. KOHBERGER from confronting through a full and fair cross-examination a portion of the case. The state seeks Mr. KOHBERGER's silence on records produced by AT&T, timing advance records. The state's motion informs the court timing advance records were not produced by AT&T Global Legal Demand Center until May of 2023. And that's exactly what they informed the court, that they weren't produced. They didn't make them. What the state is not saying is that time in advance records existed at AT&T in November and December of 2022. The state has to know this to be true because in April of 2024, the state produced the actual records from AT&T for cell towers and individual time in advance records for 2 of the 4 deceased and for one person who had been a person of interest at the beginning of the investigation, as well as over 3,800 people on the cell tower. Those records were from November of 2022 and were produced in discovery to Mr. KOHBERGER in 2024. They said, look, you gave them to us for almost 4,000 people, but you're saying that they weren't even produced until May of 2023. That is a lie, and here's the proof. You gave them to us. And then they go on to say time in advance reports from AT&T were not available to state and local law enforcement. Remember this, they were not available to the state. However, the existence of these reports in this case is direct evidence that these records could be and were provided to law enforcement by AT&T prior to the production through the GLDC. As such, Mr. KOHBERGER's AT&T time in advance report from 2022 would not have been provided through AT&T's Global Legal Demand Center. So they said the state is lying, saying the only way you can get them was the Global Legal Demand Center, and they have proof that that's not true. They gave them other people's stuff in discovery. Now, what does the defense go on to say? The timing advance reports were not common, nor were they created in the normal AT&T ecosystem. Thus, timing advance reports were not accessible to the GLDC personnel within AT&T. The FBI utilized a different legal compliance unit within AT&T to access these records. The distinction is that AT&T time in advance records were available only to select law enforcement, specifically the FBI, well before this internal change. So they're saying you had to give them through the FBI, not the state. And they called them out for the liars that they are. And what does the state immediately do? Here's what they do. They reply. Latah County prosecuting attorney respectfully replies to the defendant's objection to the motion in limine. And how does their reply start? Do they start by saying, no, that's not true. These things were not available till 2023, like they put in their motion in limine? No, the first thing they mention is carriers do not retain this data indefinitely. Wait a minute. Well, that's not what you said. You said they were not produced. Regarding AT&T, before June of 2023, AT&T retained time in advance records for 7 days. Oh, what? Before June of 2023, AT&T retained time in advance records for 7 days. Wait a minute. The state has been advised and will offer documentation or testimony that records are produced by the GLDC, and GLDC did not begin producing timing advance records until May of 2023. So what is this? Now you've got, oh, they kept them for 7 days crap. So you admit that you lied in writing. And by the way, this is how many days after their lie? How many days after your lie was this one that you admitted to lying on? Oh, this is 24th day of March, 30 days later. So they lied 30 days later. Now they're going to come with this, and they're going to admit that that was a lie. So now they're admitted liars. So now they're saying, well, they kept them for 7 days. These records were not routinely provided. That's not what you said. You said that they were not available. They didn't make them. They didn't start producing them. Now they weren't routinely provided in response. So after June, AT&T started providing these records pursuant to the legal demand. In this case, the homicides occurred on November 13th. BRYAN KOHBERGER was identified as a suspect on December 19th. Search warrants for his AT&T records were executed on December 23rd. At this point, time in advance records were not available for BRYAN KOHBERGER's phone to cover the relevant time period, November 13th, 2022. Well, if that was the case, liars, that you just admitted to lying, if that was the case, well, let me ask you this. Why didn't you produce BRYAN KOHBERGER's timing advance records for those 7 days? Because we know from Brett Payne's testimony that he absolutely asked for those time in advance records, and I bet I can go through that warrant that you got attached to this where it asks for them, and when you asked for the time in advance records for everybody else, you're saying they produced it for 7 days. So why didn't you at least produce the 7 days if you weren't lying outright? Because you know that you're still lying. And once you lie once, we're supposed to believe 30 days later when you admit to that lie and you start telling another one, we're supposed to believe it. And I've got morons out here saying, here you go, this is proof. These people out there are shady or they're stupid. I don't know what's the difference. But what do they say? The state is attaching affidavits from AT&T verifying that the state did not receive timing advance records for BRYAN KOHBERGER's phone. Here they are once again trying to point to the state, not the feds. And they're going to try to produce more affidavits testifying to this? Well, wait a minute. You were going to produce documentation or testimony that they didn't produce them at all in your motion in limine. Now we're expected to believe the affidavits saying that they didn't produce them except for 7 days, yet you didn't give them their 7-day report for BRYAN that you asked for, that you got on everybody else you asked for. And we're not talking about the state here. Everybody knows they didn't give them to the state. They've already proved that. So where is this time in advance records from the feds? And you're not going to be able to get away with this because we're calling you out on it. And it's BS. And we know that it's important because of what you're trying to do in this case. You're trying to take somebody that went this way, eliminate video camera that shows they didn't go this way, and then eliminate these time in advance records that prove he went this way so you can say his car is over here when you know it's not. Give it up, state. There are some egregious things going on in this case. And that's just the beginning. That's just the beginning. The things that they're pulling as it relates to some of the things in this case are things that I knew they were going to try to pull from the very beginning. You can go back in my videos. I've said 1,000 times. I said they didn't have any cellular data on BRYAN KOHBERGER between the times of, it turned out it was 254. I thought it was 247 to 448, but it's 254 to 448. So all of the talk has always been about, well, they've got him around the house. Well, I knew what that talk was. It had nothing to do with the time of the atrocity. That was on the previous trips that KOHBERGER had made to Moscow. Well, Ann Taylor said in court what those trips were for. And we now know through the state's authentication of records what those trips were for. It was Kohberger going to the store. Yet, when we start talking about drive test data, and that's something else that I'll get into here in the next video or two, because we remember Cy Ray on the stand testifying to the fact that the drive test data was incomplete. And they didn't do drive test data to the place that mattered the most, which was 1122 King Road. And they eliminated 95% of the drive test data that they should have done. And we all remember him saying that in court. And why was that important? Because it was the drive test data that Special Agent FBI guy is going to try to refer to on those trips that Kohberger made to Moscow before the unalivings. I see what their game is now. You know, it originally started with those trips were stalking, and then they said, no, he didn't stalk them. And then it went to those self-authentication of records. They were going to try to put Kohberger in a store when one of the other people were in stores and use that. Now they're going back to their original idea. We're going to try to manipulate the drive testing data and show that Kohberger had made 20 trips over there between 10 and 4 a.m. and stalked out the residents when they know that's a lie. So, you know, a lot of people would be faced with all of this, all these lies and all the piling on that the mainstream morons and the local Jacamo schmoes that, you know, are just on social media acting like they're, you know, Murphy's dog, and they're really nothing more than a paid agent. I mean, they really are. So most people would just go, you know what, this is too much to battle. I'm just going to have to give up. Well, I'm not most people. In fact, my head's about as hard as a granite stone. So I will just continue to fight and fight harder and continue to point out the lies and the manipulation and hope that we get some traction before this thing goes to trial, because I'm not going to sit back and watch a travesty unfold before my very eyes and do nothing about it when I could have done something about it. And I'm doing all I can about it right now. Please like and subscribe to the channel, post your comments, thoughts, criticisms, and until next time, Pavarotti is out.
Fly away. It's the first time of today.